So, you've decided to make an improvised face mask. Let's assume it's similar to a fabric one from this 2013 study. You use a cotton t-shirt, and hopefully it stops 50% of small particulates, like this one. Sounds pretty good. Let's see how it compares to other common masks, and how confident you should be wearing it. Alright, so in the study, these homemade masks were being compared to surgical masks. And you might think, great, surgical masks stop viruses. Well, no, they're not rated for that. Let me show you where your surgical mask and your homemade mask rank on the scale. Up at the top, you got your full face mask with a P3 filter. Now the full face means that it covers your eyes, it's got a great seal, it's made of rubber, and the P3 filter means that it is rated for viruses. This stops 99.9 something % of small particulates. A half face mask doesn't protect your eyes, you might have to wear goggles, but it's still got that rubber, brilliant face seal, it's reusable, it's got replaceable filters. Doctors use this type of thing if there are enough of them. These days doctors are using surgical masks if they're unlucky. And it's still got your P3 filter, which generally speaking would be rated against viruses. Then you drop down, you go to a respirator. Now a respirator is like a thick dust mask with an exhalation valve. This is still P3 rated, so it's filtering the air really well, but now because you're using a respirator, which just goes around your nose and mouth, and it's held on by a couple of elastic bands, now you're starting to get a worse face seal. It starts coming off if you move too much. It's harder to wear, and there aren't many of these P3 filters anymore either. So now we're dropping down to P2. Now P2, I think, filters something like 94% of small particulates, and I believe that a P2 is the European version of a N95 in America. Now N95s are thought to be sufficient in America. In the UK, I wasn't aware of people saying that these were good against viruses. I thought they only suggested P3 filters. But it does seem that CDC has been saying for a while that N95s are okay. I think P2 is the European equivalent, so maybe they're alright, maybe you want to go with a P2, but you're starting to get into the territory of something that isn't really rated for viruses. Now dropping down, you got your respirator, but it's got a P1 filter. Now you've got something that really isn't rated by anyone for viruses if you've got a choice. Except that lots of us now don't have a choice, even doctors and healthcare workers. And we still haven't dropped down to surgical masks, except now we do. And now we're on something that has a terrible face seal. You can put your fingers into the gaps, at least if they're worn by people who aren't trained. And let's face it, you probably aren't trained to wear one of these things. They've got a terrible face seal. No one thinks that they filter viruses very efficiently. They're mostly just used for people who are already sick to stop them coughing on other people. And incidentally, that's still the recommendation from the World Health Organization as to when you should wear a surgical mask, unless you're caring for someone who's sick. And after all this, do you see we've already got to the stage where this is not sufficient to protect you entirely against a virus. It may help, but it won't protect you entirely. Although no mask protects you 100%, they just get to 99.9 whatever. And we now drop down to your homemade mask. This is where your homemade mask sits. And I know this might be quite disheartening, but in some senses, it's intended to be, because a full sense of confidence can be quite dangerous if you think that a mask will keep you safe when it won't. It's important to know the proper context of your mask. That's not to say that a homemade mask has no value. It may do some mild filtration. It may catch some droplets that come from your mouth and stop you infecting other people. It may stop droplets that come from other people and stop them infecting you. Even if it had virtually no filtration, it may stop you subconsciously touching your own nose and mouth. A great start to keeping safe that won't run out of supply is to social distance, isolate, and do the 5. There are certainly some dangers to wearing a mask if you're not trained, and I've made a separate video on that, but there could be some benefits too. And, as a slim silver lining, I find this quite encouraging, because plenty of people won't have access to proper masks at the moment. But if you can make one at home, as terrible as this is, as low on the list as this is, and as much as it should be your last resort, it means that a tea towel, or your pillowcase, or your cotton t-shirt may be better than nothing. And actually, that's good news.